My own daughter sat me in the middle of the room. Not out of love. Not because she wanted me close. But so everyone could see me better while they laughed. She invited her husband's friends over. Young, loud, confident people who had never felt invisible a day in their lives. Then she pulled a chair right into the center of my living room and said, smiling, "Mom, sit here. Everyone wants to meet you." Aha. I didn't understand it then. I am 72 years old. My back isn't straight anymore, my hands shake when I'm nervous, and my hearing isn't what it used to be. But my heart? My heart still feels everything. I sat down. They stood around me in a loose circle, drinks in their hands, eyes already amused. My daughter stood beside her husband, laughing before the joke had even been told. "This is her," my daughter said. "My mom." One of the men leaned forward and squinted at me. "So this is what we're all turning into, huh?" Laughter exploded. Another added, "Hey, Margaret, how many times a day do you forget where you put your glasses?" More laughter. My daughter laughed the loudest. Not nervous laughter. Not uncomfortable laughter. Enjoying it laughter. I smiled. Because when you reach my age, you learn a painful skill early. You smile so you don't ruin the room. But before this story goes any further, let me say this clearly. Backhand index pointing right if you've ever been disrespected by your own family, especially because of your age, subscribe, because this story is for you. They kept going. "Careful," her husband said, pointing at my hands. "She might spill something. These old hands aren't reliable." Someone joked about nursing homes. Someone joked about diapers. Someone joked about how old people shouldn't take things so seriously. I looked at my daughter. She didn't stop them. She didn't defend me. She just smiled and said, "Mom, don't be so sensitive. They're just having fun." Sensitive. That's what cruelty gets called when it's dressed up as humor. They talked about me like I wasn't sitting there. Like I was furniture. Like I had already faded out of the world. And in that moment, sitting in the center of my own home while my child laughed at my expense, I realized something that shook me to my core. They thought I was weak. They thought I was harmless. They thought old meant silent. They didn't know what I knew. That respect, once broken, doesn't come back with apologies. And that karma doesn't need youth to work. It only needs patience. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone and made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg. I would teach them exactly what it feels like to be laughed at by someone they never expected. When the door finally closed behind them, the house didn't feel empty. It felt exposed. Like something sacred had been peeled open and left raw. I stood exactly where they had left me. Still in that chair in the middle of the room. The same chair they had placed me in, like an exhibit. Like a joke with wrinkles. Their laughter still echoed in the walls. It always does at first. Cruel laughter has a way of hanging around longer than kindness. I didn't cry. That surprised even me. Instead, I noticed the details. The half-empty glasses on the table. The crumbs on the floor. The way my daughter's perfume lingered in the air like she still owned the space. I slowly pushed myself up. My knees protesting as they always do. And began cleaning. Not because I wanted to. Because old habits don't disappear just because your heart breaks. As I washed the dishes, my hands shook, not from age, but from something else. Realization. I kept replaying one moment over and over again. Not the jokes. Not the laughter. It was the way my daughter looked at me. Not with cruelty. With comfort. The comfort of knowing I wouldn't fight back. That's when it hit me harder than any joke ever could. She wasn't embarrassed of them. She was embarrassed of me. I dried my hands slowly and sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where I had fed her every meal of her childhood. The same table where she used to cry over scraped knees and broken hearts. I whispered out loud. "I raised you better than this." But whispers don't change anything. Décisions do. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle and creak. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired because of my body. I felt tired because I had been shrinking for too long. You see, people think getting old makes you weak. What it really does is teach you patience. It teaches you how to wait. And waiting is dangerous when paired with clarity. The next morning, I woke up early. Earlier than usual. My mind was sharp, focused, calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. I made myself coffee and sat by the window. That's when I made my decision. If my daughter wanted to laugh at my age, then I would show her exactly how powerful experience can be. Not with yelling, not with drama, not with tears, but with something far more painful. Mirror. Because nothing humbles people faster than being treated the exact way they treated you. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Names I hadn't called in years. Women my age. Women with gray hair, stiff knees, and sharp memories. Women who had also been dismissed, mocked, and underestimated. I smiled. Because my daughter had friends. But I had a generation. By the end of that week, I would invite my daughter and her husband over again. They would come expecting dinner. Expecting comfort. What they wouldn't expect was to sit exactly where I once sat. I didn't rush. That's the mistake young people make. They think speed is power. Real power moves slowly. I started with Helen. Helen is 81, walks with a cane, and once ran 3 businesses while raising 4 children alone. People see her shaking hands and forget the mind that built empires on kitchen tables. She answered on the second ring. Well, I'll be, she said. Margaret? You still alive? I smiled. Very much so, I replied. Are you free this Saturday? She laughed. Depends. Is this a funeral or a rebellion? Both, I said. She didn't ask another question. Count me in. Next was Dorothy. Dorothy lost her husband 10 years ago, and her voice 5 years after that. But when she speaks, people listen, because she only speaks when it matters. I need you, I told her. There was a pause. Then she said, what time? Then came Ruth, Elaine, Susan. Women with silver hair and steel spines. Women who had been talked over, joked about, ignored, and underestimated their entire lives. Every single one of them said yes. Not out of curiosity. Out of recognition. Because when an old woman calls another old woman with that tone in her voice, they know. By Thursday the plan was set. I invited my daughter and her husband for Sunday dinner. Nothing dramatic. Just a calm text. Dinner at my place. I'd love to see you. She replied almost immediately. Of course. We'll come. Of course you will. She didn't ask who else would be there. She never does. Sunday came quietly. I cooked, but not the way I used to. No overworking. No exhaustion. Simple food. Enough. At 4 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. First Helen. Then Dorothy. Then Ruth. One by one, my living room filled with soft voices, slow steps, and eyes that missed nothing. They dressed nicely, not fancy, just confident. Lipstick still mattered to them. Jewelry chosen with care. Posture straightened out of habit. They sat where I told them to sit. In a circle. At 5 o'clock, my daughter arrived. She froze the moment she stepped inside. Her smile hesitated. Her husband followed behind her, scanning the room like he had walked into something unfamiliar. Hi, he said. This is Helen, I said warmly. She built her own company in the 70s. Helen smiled sweetly. And this is Dorothy, I continued. She put 3 kids through college by herself. Dorothy nodded. And Ruth, she survived cancer twice. Ruth waved. My daughter laughed awkwardly. Oh, wow, you have company, she said. Yes, I replied. Just like last time. They sat down. Right in the middle. Exactly where I had sat. The women around them leaned in slightly, not aggressive, not cruel. Just present. Observant. Helen tilted her head and said, So tell me, dear, how old do you think we look? My daughter chuckled nervously. I didn't mean. Oh, relax, Ruth said lightly. We're just having fun. Her husband shifted in his chair. Dorothy spoke next. Do you always laugh this much at people's age? She asked. Silence. The room tightened. And for the first time since that night, my daughter looked uncomfortable. She tried to laugh it off, but laughter sounds different when you're the one in the center. And by the time dinner ended, she would understand exactly how age becomes power. My daughter tried to laugh. That was the first thing she did when she realized the room had changed. She forced a small smile and looked around, as if she could turn the moment back into something light and harmless. But the women sitting around her did not laugh with her. They watched. They listened. And they waited. Helen leaned forward slightly and placed her hands on her knees. Her voice was calm, steady, and confident when she spoke. "You seem uncomfortable," Helen said. "That's interesting, because you didn't mind when your mother was uncomfortable." My daughter's smile tightened. She glanced at her husband, hoping he would step in, but he was suddenly very interested in the pattern on the tablecloth. "I don't know what you mean," my daughter said, her voice a little too sharp. Dorothy spoke next. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "We mean the jokes," Dorothy said. "The ones you laughed at. The ones you allowed." The room grew quiet in a way that made every small sound feel loud. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear my daughter swallow before she spoke again. "We were just joking," she said. "My mom knows that." I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She was not a child anymore. She was a grown woman who had chosen comfort over kindness. "I knew you were joking," I said. "That's what made it hurt." Her husband shifted in his chair and cleared his throat. "This feels unnecessary," he said. "You're all taking this too seriously." Ruth turned to him slowly and met his eyes. "Serious is what happens when jokes reveal truth," Ruth said. "And the truth is, you laughed because you believed you were better." My daughter's face flushed. She crossed her arms defensively and leaned back in her chair, the same way I had done that night when I tried to make myself smaller. "I think we should eat," she said quickly. "Dinner smells great." Elaine smiled gently. "We will," she said. "But first, I have a question." She turned to my daughter and spoke carefully. "If your mother were not here, would you still defend the jokes made about her age?" My daughter opened her mouth, then closed it again. The answer did not want to come out because it would have exposed too much. I watched her struggle, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. "This isn't about embarrassing you," I said calmly. "This is about showing you what it feels like to be laughed at while pretending it doesn't matter." Her husband finally looked up. His voice was quieter now. "We didn't think it was that bad," he said. Helen nodded. "People rarely do," she replied. "Not until the mirror is placed in front of them." No one spoke for a long moment. My daughter looked around the circle and realized something she had not expected. No one was attacking her. No one was yelling. No one was joking. They were simply holding her accountable. She thought the worst part was the silence. She was wrong. The real lesson was still coming, and it would follow her long after she left my house. Dinner ended without laughter. That alone told me the lesson had landed. My daughter ate quietly, pushing food around her plate more than actually eating. Her husband barely spoke at all. The confidence they had walked in with had drained away, leaving behind something fragile and uncomfortable. When they stood to leave, my daughter hugged me. It was quick and stiff, like she was afraid I might say something else. She whispered, "We'll talk later," as if she needed time to decide which version of herself she wanted to be. After the door closed, the women stayed. They helped me clean, moving slowly but with purpose. No one rushed. No one needed to speak. There is a deep understanding that exists between women who have lived long enough to recognize quiet victories. Helen squeezed my hand before she left. "You did good," she said. "You didn't humiliate them. You educated them." That night, my daughter drove home in silence. She told me this later, but I already knew. She said the jokes replayed in her head, one by one. She said she kept seeing me in that chair, smiling politely while people laughed around me. She said the realization came suddenly and painfully. She had become the kind of person she once promised herself she would never be. Guilt does not arrive loudly. It arrives slowly, like fog. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my daughter. Her voice sounded different. Not defensive. Not amused. Just tired. "I didn't sleep," she said. "I keep thinking about what you said." I listened without interrupting. "I didn't protect you," she continued. "And I don't know why that feels worse now than it did that night." I closed my eyes and breathed in slowly. "Because now you understand," I said. Understanding changes everything. She asked if I was angry. I told her the truth. I was hurt, I said. And hurt that is ignored hardens. She was quiet for a long time before she spoke again. I don't want to be that person, she said. I believed her. But belief does not erase consequences. We ended the call politely. No dramatike palegis. No sadem vergibnis. Just honesty sitting between us, heavy and real. That afternoon, I sat by the window and watched the street fill with movement. Children played. Cars passed. Life continued, as it always does. I felt calm, because karma had done its work without cruelty, and my daughter was just beginning to understand that respect, once broken, must be rebuilt slowly. She thought the lesson was over once the guilt set in. She did not realize that the real consequence would show itself in public, where laughter cannot be hidden. My daughter did not tell anyone about that dinner. She did not mention the circle of women. She did not talk about the questions that left her speechless. She tried to move forward as if the moment would quietly fade away. But moments like that do not disappear. They wait. A week later, she attended a small gathering at a friend's house. The same group of people were there. The same people who had laughed in my living room while I sat in the middle of it. She arrived smiling, ready to reclaim the version of herself that had always been comfortable in those rooms. But something was different. One of the women she had laughed with looked at her carefully and said, "I heard about dinner at your mom's house." My daughter froze. "What do you mean?" she asked. The woman shrugged. "Word gets around," she said. "People talk." Another voice joined in. "They say it got real uncomfortable." My daughter laughed weakly and tried to brush it off. It was just family stuff. But the energy in the room had shifted. The jokes did not land the same way. The laughter was thinner, more cautious. Later that evening, someone made a joke about aging. The kind of joke my daughter used to enjoy. This time, the room went quiet. All eyes turned to her. "Well," someone asked. "Funny, right?" She felt it then. That heat in her face. That tightness in her chest. That sudden awareness that she was standing in the center of attention without protection. She forced a smile. "I don't think that's funny anymore," she said. The silence stretched. Someone nodded slowly. "Yeah," they said. I was thinking the same. On the drive home, my daughter's hands shook on the steering wheel. She realized something important. Respect is fragile, and reputation follows behavior. The people who once laughed freely around her were now measuring their words. Not because they had changed, but because she had been exposed. At home, her husband noticed the shift. "They were weird tonight," he said. "Did you say something to your mom?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't have to." That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, the same way I had done weeks earlier. Only now, the chair in the center of the room belonged to her. And for the first time in her life, she understood how loneliness can exist in a crowd. She thought learning the lesson would ease the weight. Instead, it followed her into every room. And soon, she would come back to me with a request she never thought she would make. She came alone. That's how I knew this was different. No husband. No audience. No child. It was a quiet afternoon when the doorbell rang. I looked through the window first, out of habit, and saw her standing there with her hands folded tightly in front of her, the way she used to stand when she was a child and knew she had done something wrong. I opened the door and stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, looking around the house as if she were seeing it for the first time. The same walls. The same furniture. The same silence she had once filled with laughter that did not belong. She did not sit right away. Instead, she took a breath and said, "I owe you an apology." Not excuses. Not explanations. Just truth. "I laughed," she continued. "And I let them laugh. I told myself it was harmless because you didn't say anything." She swallowed hard. "I used your silence as permission." I felt that sentence settle deep in my chest. She sat down then, her shoulders heavy. "I thought being kind to them mattered more than protecting you," she said. "And now I understand what that says about me." I did not interrupt her. Apologies that matter need space. She looked up at me, her eyes wet but steady. "I am not asking you to forget," she said. I am not asking you to pretend it didn't happen. Her voice cracked. I am asking you to let me do better. I nodded slowly. I believe you want to change, I said. But wanting is not the same as undoing. She nodded. I know. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been holding back. Will you ever trust me again? I considered it carefully. Trust, I said, is rebuilt through behavior, not words. She accepted that answer without argument. When she stood to leave, she hugged me. This time it was not rushed. It was not stiff. It was careful. At the door she turned and said, I don't want to be the person who made her mother feel small. I watched her walk away, knowing something important had shifted. Not because she apologized, but because she finally understood the weight of what she had done. She thought the apology was the hardest part. She did not realize that proving change would test her in front of the very people who once laughed with her. Change does not announce itself. It shows up quietly, when no one is watching, and asks whether you mean what you said. My daughter's moment came sooner than she expected. It happened at another gathering. The same people. The same living room. Different energy. Someone brought up family. Someone laughed about parents getting old and dramatic. It was said casually, the way cruelty often is. My daughter felt the room lean in, waiting for her reaction. She recognized that familiar comfort, the one she used to enjoy, the unspoken invitation to join in. She thought of me sitting in that chair. She thought of my smile. She thought of the silence she once mistook for strength. She set her glass down. That's not funny, she said. The words landed heavy. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Come on, we're just joking. She shook her head. No. We're being disrespectful. The room went quiet. Her husband shifted beside her. You're making this awkward, he whispered. She looked at him and said something she had never said before. I don't care. That was the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. But costly. A few people exchanged looks. Someone changed the subject. The night moved on, but something had cracked. On the drive home, her husband was angry. You embarrassed me, he said. She kept her eyes on the road. You embarrassed my mother. They did not speak much after that. When she came to see me the next day, she told me everything. I chose you, she said simply. I nodded. I saw, I replied. Because respect leaves traces. It changes the way people speak when you are not in the room. She did not ask for praise. She did not ask for reassurance. She understood that choosing the right side does not always feel good at first. But it feels honest. She thought standing up once would be enough. She did not yet understand that real change would ask her to do it again, when the stakes were even higher. The second test came when she least expected it. It was a family gathering this time. Bigger. Louder. More people watching. Her husband's relatives were there, along with some of the same friends who had once laughed in my living room. The energy was familiar, comfortable in the way old habits always are. Someone brought up me. Not my name. Not my life. My age. Well, one of them said, smiling. At least Margaret still has her health. Old people usually complain more. A few people laughed. My daughter felt it immediately. That pull to stay quiet. That old instinct to smooth things over, to avoid tension. She remembered her promise. She remembered the chair in the middle of my room. She spoke. My mother is not a joke, she said clearly. The laughter stopped. Her husband stared at her, shocked. You're overreacting, he said. Nobody meant anything by it. She looked at him and shook her head. That's exactly the problem. The room shifted uncomfortably. Someone muttered that it was just a comment. Someone else rolled their eyes. Her husband stood up. If this is how you're going to act, he said, maybe we should leave. She stood too. Then we should, she replied. The drive home was quiet. Heavy. At home, the argument came fast and sharp. You're choosing her over me, he said. She did not yell. She did not cry. I am choosing respect, she answered. And if that costs me comfort, I will pay it. That sentence changed everything. Because some people love you only when you stay small. She came to see me the next morning. She looked tired. Strong. Certain. I don't know what this means for my marriage, she said. But I know what it means for me. I took her hand. Sometimes, I said, doing the right thing rearranges your life. She nodded. For the first time, she was not afraid of that. She thought standing up for me was the end of the lesson. She did not yet realize that I had one final gift to give her, and it would change how she saw herself forever. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once fed her cereal before school, and wiped tears from her cheeks when the world felt too big. She looked older to me then. Not in years but in understanding. I used to think strength was being liked, she said quietly. Now I know it's being able to live with yourself. I nodded. That realization, I told her, is something most people never reach. They grow old without ever growing brave. She reached for my hand and held it the way children do when they finally realize their parents are human too. I'm sorry I needed to lose comfort to learn this, she said. I smiled gently. Age does not make us wise, I said. Experience does. And sometimes experience hurts. We sat together in silence for a while. Not awkward. Not heavy. Honest. I thought back to that night when I sat in the center of the room while people laughed around me. I thought about how small I felt, and how quickly the world assumes old means finished. But age gives you something youth never can. It gives you clarity. You stop begging for respect. You stop shrinking to fit other people's comfort. You stop explaining your worth. You simply stand in it. I looked at my daughter and saw someone different than the woman who had once laughed along. I saw someone who had chosen dignity over ease, even when it cost her peace. You did not defend me because I am your mother, I said. You defended me because it was right. She nodded. And that, I continued, means you will never sit silently in a room that laughs at someone weaker than you. When she left that evening, I stood at the door and watched her walk away. Not with fear. Not with regret. With pride. I am still old. My hands still shake sometimes. My knees still complain in the cold. But I am not invisible. And I am not finished. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Age does not erase your dignity. Family does not excuse disrespect. And silence is not strength when it protects cruelty. Sometimes the most powerful thing an old woman can do is stop smiling and start standing.